Hello, everybody. What's out there? Today, we're looking at the repertoire of Vladimir Kramnik with the black pieces against the pieces against e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and d4. Kramnik is one of the premier uh, players in the world that employs the move 1 e5 as a defense against e4. And let's see what he plays against the Scotch opening, which begins with d4. So let's get right into it. We got a lot of games to go through, and we're gonna, go fast. All right, so d4, that begins the Scotch. And oh, by the way, this game, it took place 2001. Um, the white player was Sadvakasov, who was 25-85 at the time, and Kramnik was the newly crowned world champion with the black pieces at 27-97. So e takes d4, main line, and knight takes d4, and Kramnik uh, at this time played bishop c5. So knight takes c6. Of course, knight f6 can be played here also. So bishop c5, attacking the piece twice. Knight takes c6, and queen f6. Of course, there is a blatant mate threat here. So queen d2, defending that. And then b takes c6 by Kramnik. Of course, queen takes c6 is also playable, but one of the um, ideas behind this particular defense is black is activity and rapid development. So you'll see black often allows a damaged pawn structure, but in exchange it gets open lanes and rapid development. White, on the other hand, will have a solid pawn structure and good endgame chances, usually, but usually will fall behind in development somewhat, and sometimes have some trouble developing his pieces. If he can solve the problems with catching up in development and arranging his pieces correctly, he often has a good game. All right, so black's activity uh, is designed to offset the nice pawn structure that white obtains. So let's look how Kramnik deals with these ideas in the position. So b takes c6. He takes on damaged pawn structure, but he has an open b file, um, open a6 to g1 diagonal, also for the bishop. Knight c3, knight e7. Also note too how the queen on d2 is blocking the bishop on c1, and this is what I was talking about. That how white's development is somewhat compromised a little bit, and this gives black the time he needs to get active. So knight e7, bishop d3, castles, castles. All right. So white's position looks pretty good. So black has to stay on his p's and q's, attack the center, playing moves like getting d5 in at some point, but basically putting a lot of pressure on white before he can get stabilized. Knight g6, knight a4, attacking the bishop. Bishop d6, preserving the piece. And notice the lack of protection or lack of pieces on the king side for white. This is a major factor in this opening. Again, it's all about activity here. G3. Right, this keeps pieces off of f4, but notice there's a little weakness created now in the white king side. Rook e8. Queen e3. The queen has to move again in order to release the bishop on c1, which in turn is blocking the rook on a1. So again, you see this idea in the position of the pristine pawn structure of white and the activity of black. Bishop b7. There's finally bishop d2. knight e5, and now we have forks, ideas of a fork creeping up in the position on knight on f3, bishop c3, and now queen f3. So Kramnik offers an ending. Queen takes f3, knight takes f3, check. And although white has a slightly better pawn structure, black is equalized here. He stays active enough, and there's not enough uh, weakness in the black position for white to claim an advantage. So king g2, knight e5, bishop takes e5, rook takes e5. Of course, after knight e5, bishop e2, trying to preserve the bishop pair as possible. Bishop takes, rook takes, f4, rook e8 by Kramnik, e5. And notice how after the pieces start getting traded off, you can see the superiority in white with white's pawn structure. This is what white normally wants to do, is just kind of ward off black's attacking possibilities and then transpose the position into a superior ending. Here is equals offset by black's bishop pair. Notice the two bishops that black holds versus the bishop and knight. This offsets white's beautiful pawn structure here. Bishop f8, rook ae1, and d6. So, of course, there's a common theme, attacking the opponent's center and also trying to get rid of some of the weakness in your position, namely this pawn island, d6, c6, and c7. Rook e3, rook e7, bishop e4, d takes, f takes, and we see now white has this isolated pawn. This is a common theme in the Scotch, where black tries to isolate this pawn because black must tear down the center. Kramnik plays g6 to prevent the tactic of bishop takes h7 after rook takes e5, which would be a blunder at this moment because of bishop takes h7. So g6 is played, bishop f3. Now the pawn is protected. Another idea in the position is knight c5, and rook takes e5, knight takes b7, and then f5, and you see the rook on e3 is pinned. And again, this is it's pretty equal right here. But bishop f3 was played, rook e6, rook d1, and notice now after rook e6, knight c5 is no longer possible due to the bishop on f8. We'll just capture it. Rook d1, rook a e8, piling up on the e pawn. White realizes that there's no use in trying to waste resources protecting the e pawn, so he decides to attack on the 7th rank. Rook takes e5, rook takes e5, and this is good for black in that he trades the e pawn effectively for the pawn on c7. Bishop is attacked, but no big deal. Rook comes back. Rook takes e7, bishop takes e7. So now we see that black has done a great job in getting rid of the weaknesses in his position. He has just these two isolated pawns that are protected, and but again, he has the two bishops, which are very potent and dangerous in positions like this. King f2, and I'll just go through the remainder of the moves real quick. The position is equal here, but there's chances in the position, and we can see here Kramnik being over a little bit, almost 200 points higher rated. He begins to show his level here as he marches the king to the center of the board, and now we see the bishops beginning to make themselves felt here. Now, in order for white to stop the black king from penetrating to the king side, white brings his king over to the In order to stop the black king from penetrating to the queen side and winning the weak B pawn, white brings his king over to the queen side to try to prevent that. However, we see on the opposite side of the board, there's the 3-2 king side pawn majority that black has, and Kramnik just starts to push that. Again, notice the power of these two bishops. Kramnik marks time here, and notice that knight just is just out of place here, and we can see the dominance in the position. G5. So notice this position right here. You have the king, the white king, all the way on A4, and so the only way to stop those pawns from rolling on the king side is black has to use his pieces. So this is a bad setup here for white. So B5, king takes C5. Kramnik is now winning. And I'll just go through the remainder quickly. He fixes the pawns on the dark squares. The king tries to get back over, but the bishops create a strong barrier. And this is very instructive, just a sacrifice, and there's no way to stop the pawn from queening. Okay, so we can see that Kramnik has chose this system against the Scotch here back in these days, in 2001. Another interesting fact is that Kramnik actually helped Garry Kasparov as one of his seconds in preparing against Anatoly Karpov in 1990. Those of you familiar with that match will know that Kasparov employed the Scotch, right? Resurrected that opening, which was rarely seen for a very long time at top levels, and he helped Kramnik. Kramnik helped Kasparov prepare this opening, so I'm sure Kramnik knows the Scotch in and out. So it's interesting that at this time he chose this defense. Let's go on to the next one. Again, we're going to be going fast. This game took place in 2001. The white player is Alexander Morozevich. So he takes, knight takes again, bishop c5. And instead of the variation we just saw with knight takes c6 and queen takes f6, Morozevich chose bishop e3. Again, queen f6. And black is threatening to win the piece on d4. c3, knight g e7. And again, this variation for black is about the rapid development here. Just to show you real quick, if knight takes c6, black is not hanging a piece here, but he just simply plays bishop takes e3, threatening mate. Then after f takes e3, knight takes c6, and white is worse. So after knight g e7, bishop c4 is normal, knight e5, and we can see here that white is developing pretty good. So you get this battle. White's goal is to try to set up a nice pawn center after f4, and basically to drive the pieces back. Sometimes when you have a pawnless center where you just have pieces in the center, they're very susceptible to be driven back by pieces. So if black is not careful, moves like f4, e5 will drive the black pieces to an inferior position. So this is why black must make sure he's attacking at every possibility. So here knight e5 attacks the bishop on c4. Bishop e2 driving it back, and now queen g6 with this double attack on the e pawn and the g pawn. Castle, again, this is all well known. d6. This pawn can be taken by the queen, but it's not in the spirit of the opening. Again, and should be, penalized. Notice it's about development, especially in these open games. So just pawn grabbing in the opening. This move can be met by knight b5, for example, and then you have this threat right here of knight c7, forking the king and the rook. And white would be clearly better here. So that move doesn't look right, and it shouldn't be pursued. So instead, we see um, the traditional move D6. So D6, letting the bishop out, just continuing development. No real, need to explain D6. F4. Again, so now here's the idea I was speaking about earlier, that if black is not careful, he can, get his pieces driven back. Now, notice the difference here. I was showing you a few moves ago. In this position, if queen takes e4 is met by knight b5. And the reason why is the F pawn is here, protecting his bishop. But now, after f4, this bishop is no longer protected. So that's why this move now is possible. Queen takes e4, but have no fear, it's not a blunder, it's all theory. Bishop f2, and it's a critical position here. Bishop takes d4. Okay, if notice the knight on e5 is attacked. If knight just moves back, right, plays passively here, this allows white to pick up an initiative. Again, queen being exposed, bishop d3, say queen d5, c4, and then the queen is just lacking in squares and winds up having to give itself up. Play can go like that, for example. White is better. Interesting, continuation, but white is better there. This is why bishop takes d4. Okay, the fight for the initiative. So bishop takes d4, c takes d4. Now the knight retreats. And there's a little thread here. So g3. Now g3 protects the f4 pawn, but allows black to develop with tempo. Bishop h3. Bishop f3. Queen f5. Rook e1. And notice again, right? Now bishop takes g2. It's possible. I'm sorry, not bishop takes g2. Bishop takes b7. But then just rook b8. Okay. Again, it's very important, especially in these open games. So rook e1. Kramnik played d5 here. Queen b3, putting pressure on d5 and b7. And here, castle's kingside took place, and they drew the game shortly after. Queenside castling is also possible. And at the knight c3, for example, bishop g4, bishop g2, the game could end in a draw like that. So we saw a dynamic display. Morozevich is a sharp player, and we saw Kramnik go blow for blow. But this f4 continuation is very sharp and is based on concrete variation. So you have to know this to really play it without getting jammed up for both sides. But the key thing to remember here is that after f4 is played, this bishop is unprotected. Other moves have been tried here, like knight d2 for instance, protecting the pawn. But again, every move takes time. And by holding that f pawn back, it allows again the development of this light square bishop with tempo. After say bishop f3, these are just sample lines, castles. And without the f4 push, black is a-okay. This knight is just sitting here on e5 with no worries. Again, this is all just a sample. Just challenging, destroying the white center, and just simplifying the game here. Another option, instead of knight d2, but protecting the pawn just the same, is f3. Again, there's castles. So the lesson here is that basically if white doesn't put the pressure on black to try to play f4 and drive the knight out of the center, um, black just equalizes with no problem. Again, it's another sample line, and we can just see that black, has no problems. He just has adequate counter chances. So knight d2, f3 being options, but the sharpest being f4. However, the e pawn is not adequately protected, and Kramnik was able to equalize. So we can see that the basic idea, right, is that black attacks vigorously, develops quickly, attacks the white center vigorously, those squares, and basically before white can solidify, his central situation. And that's the idea. Yeah. If he's able to solidify this and play f4 and drive the black pieces back, then black would be in trouble. This line would be no good. But so far, theory's showing he's not really able to do that. Okay, let's move on. 2002. This is Kramnik again with the black pieces versus Deep Fritz. And I'm not gonna go through the whole game, but just give you the opening. Again, we see this is Kramnik's um, bread and butter at this time. He's playing this bishop c5, knight takes c6, and again, just remember Morozevich had played bishop e3 here, which is completely possible. Queen f6, threatening mate. Queen d2, and it's funny because it's an obvious mate attempt. And if I remember correctly, there's a game you had to look up. I think Ivanchuk was mated in a line like this. I think he lost a game at 13 moves one time with the white pieces. With this setup. It was a long, like in the 90s sometime. To look that up, but I'm pretty sure my memory serves me correct. So Queen d2 is played here, protecting, and d takes c6 this time. Now another time, Kramnik had took with the b pawn. But here's a obvious looking move here. Opens lines. The bishop the light square bishop can come out, and then right after that, the rook can come out. Again, black is playing for rapid development here. Right, you have to jump on white before he can get that center fully established. Knight c3, knight e7, queen f4. So Fritz wants to go right into this endgame, attacking this pawn, and also threatening to double up black's pawns. Kramnik keeps developing. He stays within the spirit of the opening. Again, this queen takes c7 is not, a good move here. Not only does it violate the spirit of the opening, but it just, I just wanted to show you that, just to drill in your mind that these type of pawn grabbing moves, especially in these open games like this, usually lead to trouble. The computer just simply doubled up the f pawns. And again, what is black having a compensation here? Black has a lead in development. If we just count the pieces, one piece developed white, but black has 1, 2, 3, and he has open lanes. D file and G file is open, right? So this lets you know that the activity is what black is looking for to compensate for his pawn deficit. Excuse me, not pawn deficit, but his structural deficit. So knight a4, bishop b4 check, and c3. So we're taking the natural square away from this knight. So now this knight would be badly placed. If bishop d2, Kramnik could just take it and continue with this lead in development. Okay. Knight c3 is possible here, just going back, but that's good for black also. Black again could just castle here or attack the center at 5. So C3 was chosen. So he gets a tempo against black, but the tempo is not worth that much. The C3 just blocks again this retreat square for this knight. Bishop D6, Bishop E3, and B6 by Kramnik. This is really again not about this protecting this pawn. For instance, in castling. It's really not. It's not about that because at the B6, um, there could be some problems for black here, trying to preserve his pieces. Even at the Bishop A6, Bishop D7, he's gonna have to give up something over here to get these pieces out. But it's more about protecting the square C5. Okay, so B6, F4. Remember what I told you about the center is white wants to establish a nice center and drive the black pieces away. So King F2. Some of you out there want to play this move. F4, I can just feel it in the atmosphere. And F4, Bishop D7, but now you have this hole on E5. Okay. So F4 castle, King F2 instead. C5, C4, knight C6. Notice soon as C4 is played, already thinking about occupying the square. That's the thing about advancing pawns. You always gotta understand that there's some kind of weakness left behind. Black plays F5, E5. And what this move does is it weakens white's hold on the D5 square. In exchange, black gets his piece driven back. So we can see the game is, like a back and forth affair. Okay. And then Kramnik played knight B4. He secures the bishop pair and bishop G7. Knight D5. Kramnik plays C6. Now some of you are saying, hey, why not just play bishop takes D5, C takes D5, and then rook takes D5? It's possible. But after bishop C4, say rook D4, then this pawn is going to drop right here. And then there's no defender against this pawn, this E pawn, which can become very dangerous in a few moves. This is why you just play C6, just deciding to kick the knight out. Knight F6, bishop takes F6, E takes F6, and rook E8. So you can see Kramnik has obtained a good game. Notice again the theme, the activity of black compared to white's lack of activity. Another thing here though is that white has a little damaged pawn structure also. Alright, so without going on with the rest of the game, Kramnik actually actually won this game. He maintained his activity, and while I'm talking, I just fast go through the game. But he just maintained his activity and simplified to win an endgame right here. Again, you see the old idea, 3-2 majority on the queen side, and he was able to push that through. Eventually, won the game. You see the other pawn dropping, and that was it. Step in the time machine, 2004, against another human player. The white pieces was Francisco Vallejo Ponce from France, rated 2663. Again, there's that variation again. And we see this time, instead of the move queen d2, preserving the queens, but having the negative effect of blocking the light square bishop in, we see queen f3 just offering an immediate endgame. And white takes on the similar pawn structure deficiencies that black has also. So only advantage, right? And if it can be called an advantage, only advantage that white has here is that he has slightly more space with the e pawn. But again, it's not nothing for black even to be worried about here. And after these moves, the game was just drawn. There's absolutely nothing to worry about, especially after say f5 right here. There's nothing to worry about from black. Next game is 2007, Jan Smeets. So we can see that, and again, I'm showing wins, losses, draws, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just so you can see what is this guy's repertoire against you know the this opening. So he loves Bishop C5 all the way up to 2007. Here's this game, this opening again. We see this variation with Bishop E3 versus Morozevich. And we see an instant D5 just attacking the center immediately. The Morozevich game, Bishop, more active move was played. And, with the Bishop coming out to C4, if you remember, Kramnik had responded with knight E5. Another variation is G3. And G3 plans to fianchetto the bishop, more defensive in nature. Again, it takes time. But what G3 does, it prevents the tricks, with D6 and, Queen G6 and the bishop coming to H3, etc. And black plans on white, solidifies this E4 pawn, which was vulnerable, if you remember. So he wants to play Bishop G2 and then, play F4. The same ideas of driving the black pieces away. This is what you would call a pawnless occupation of the center. So black just has his pieces out there and hasn't really committed any pawns to the center. You always got to be careful when you do that because it's easy to get driven away. All right, so G3 again takes time, right? It's a nice idea, but it takes time. And with that time, black immediately strikes in the center with D5 before the pawn can be really supported. Bishop G2, supporting the pawn, of course. If Knight D2, black wouldn't want to take here, but instead would just castle. Say knight takes C6, for example, and here the queen takes C6 is proper, because if bishop takes E3 here, then white has this nice in-between move, knight takes E7, and that's with check. And be losing a piece. So D5, bishop G2. Kramnik just took. D takes E4. Now knight D2. Bishop drops back. Knight takes E4. Anticipating that move. That's why bishop B6 was played. Queen G6. Castle. And castle in here with the center totally dissolved. That if white can't generate an initiative, then the game is going to be equal. Both sides have pristine pawn structures, and the symmetry is to such a great degree that the only way to have an advantage is to have an initiative in this position. So if there's no initiative, there's no advantage. Knight C5, a couple of pieces get traded off. And we see white having slightest advantages in the center. But again, Kramnik loves having that bishop here, which he maintains. Gives it up in order to gain this equality. And then that was it. Both players agreed to a draw. It's from a blitz game 2007 with White. Savchenko. Again, Kramnik opts for this variation. So you can see this is Kramnik's bread and butter versus Scotch here. At least at this point in his career. Let me just go back. So after bishop c5, queen f6, we've seen this. There's again an idea of queen takes offering the endgame, and we could see in that last game with this variation that Kramnik just simply traded queens. Here he plays bishop b takes c6. This is a blitz game with White with Savchenko, 25-83. He goes into the ending, but Black does not have the luxury of attacking White's doubled pawns because the knight was able to trade capture on f3. So now he gets the double pawns. Again, there's the attack on the center. Nothing to write home about. Again, this is a blitz game. And actually, Kramnik has an advantage here. But he was not able to win this game. Like, for instance, here, knight h4 is a good move. Or rook h4, just putting a lot of pressure on these weakened pawns. Knight h4 is good here. He's trying to exploit this pin right here. Okay, let's move on. Against Wrublewski. It's a blitz game also. And here, remember g3 was played by Jan Smeets. And I explained the idea there. Kramnik had opted for a quick d5, which was perfectly playable. Here, again, it's blitz, so he plays more risky. And the idea is just to, exploit the fianchetto position. This move provokes h3 in order to keep the king side closed after, say, h4 and then possibly g4. There it is. However, with each pawn move, a weakness is left behind, and the weakness in this case is the f4 square. Queen d2. So now the pieces have to make up for the weakness. So queen d2, castle, and now f4. And again, remember, this is that idea. Black has a pawnless center, and so White wants to use his pawns to drive back the black pieces. If he can do this, he becomes better. However, at the rook e8, it doesn't quite work out. I'll give you an example here. Hold on, there's a dog barking in the background. Hopefully that'll calm down. All right, so after e5, this was a mistake here. And you can pause the video and try to see, what should happen. But I'll go on and explain the concepts. Okay, so Wrublewski, who was playing the white pieces here, did not play the mistake e5, but he played bishop g2, and I'll show you why in a second, why he didn't choose e5. Here, Kramnik played d5, just striking at the center. And there's all type of difficulties here, and White playing a move, for example, e takes e5, but first, knight takes c6 was played in the game. Again, I'll show you why e5 is not played. It looks like a good continuation, and of course, it's something that White would love to play. The problem is that White's king is stuck in the middle of the board, and this invites the sacrifice. Knight g takes e5, and again, this is the purpose of all of Black's activity in the opening. It's just for a moment like this. G takes e5, f takes e5, and queen takes e5. And all of a sudden, the bishop on e3 is attacked by Black here. So king d1, for example, and then queen takes e3, and white's position would just fall apart here, and he's in just a lot of trouble. And I'm just giving these as sample variations that could take place here, just so you can see the advantage of black having this overwhelming lead in development, combined with the king being in the middle of the board. And here, white might as well just resign. So instead of move like e5, knight takes c6 is played, just getting rid of some pieces here. This was also a mistake. So knight takes c6, bishop takes e3. It brings the queen into the firing zone on the e file. Knight takes f4 and castles. And Kramnik had a nice move here, just knight takes g2. King takes g2 and queen takes c6. Okay, and Kramnik went on to win this game easily right after these following moves. There's too much of an advantage here. Okay, so we see so far, and that was a blitz game, so not a big deal. But these guys do play, the blitz games pretty accurately here. So their blitz games are, good to go. Okay, now, for some reason, all right, this is now a game Kramnik played against Nepomniachtchi at the 73rd title steel in 2011, and here, and I would love to find out why, but Kramnik, instead of playing this move bishop c5, which he was, undefeated with basically from 2001 all the way up, he decided to change his repertoire at this point. So I'm from the old school, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, um, ideology. So, but he might have found something in his analysis where he decided that, bishop c5 was not a good continuation anymore. So Kramnik started playing this move, knight f6, which is of course, one of the main lines. Nothing wrong with it. And this game against Nepomniachtchi, knight takes c6, b takes c6, e5, queen e7, all mainline stuff. Knight d5, c4, and he played knight b6. The other move, of course, is bishop a6. Knight b6, knight c3, bishop b7, and ideas quick queenside castling. And again, it's all about activity of black versus the better pawn structure in space that white has. G6, there again, this is a major trump in white's position. Black wants to tear it down. H4, bishop g7, castles, h5, and rook ae8, rook e1, bishop a6, attacking this pawn, queen e4, and now queen c5, attacking the pawn again. And notice the c pawn and the f2 pawn is attacked. So bishop g3, Nepomniachtchi decides to preserve the f pawn. Bishop takes c4, h takes g6, f takes g6, knight a4, knight takes c4, queen takes c4 check, and king h8. Notice the pin here, so queen takes, a4 is not available. Rook h4, d5, queen c2. Of course, this move taken en passant, e takes d6 would be a great blunder, after rook takes e1. d5, queen c2, endgame by Kramnik, knight c5, f3. Again, if he tries to play a move like f4, protecting the e5 pawn just gives up squares. Knight e4, right, with tempo. So it's not like uh, white can play bishop d3 real quick. A move like bishop h2 would have to be played first, but then black can continue attacking the center with a move like g5, and if f3, then the rook would drop. So it's not possible to fortify the center. This means f takes g5 would have to be played. Then black just gets active, and we can see that the e pawn is weak and the g pawn is weak. So with all that said, this is why Nepomniachtchi couldn't really afford to protect the e pawn. g5, the same idea, making sure there's no connection ever between the f pawn and the e pawn. Rook g4, rook f5, knight takes, h5. Little tactical display here. And again, we can see that finally the pawn just drops and the game ends in a draw. So Kramnik again formally played the move bishop c5 in this position, but switched in 2011 after about 10 years of playing that variation to knight f6. Next game is against Shirov, Alexei Shirov. Again, Kramnik goes with this same type of variation here. This time he castles queen side. And the game gets very sharp. So you might be saying, hey, why would Shirov give up the pawn? Well, this is a very, very sharp line here. The queen takes e5. The idea is to play bishop c3, and we can see the rook and queen lined up. And then tactics abound here. So after bishop c3, bishop b4, black gives up a piece temporarily. Queen cannot be captured due to the pin, but notice the bishop is not protected. Bishop takes b4, and then rook he8. Now the knight is threatened. Again, this is all about activity versus structure here. So we see black is extremely active. Black is not really developed yet. So f3, d5. Why does this work? Now notice the queen is not protected after the f pawn moves from f2 to f3. So the knight is guarded temporarily, but the queen is now, in trouble if the knight were to move. a5, knight takes c4, queen takes a7, and you see all of this stuff going on. This is all analyzed. So queen takes a7, queen takes b2, queen takes a6 check, king d7. Notice the knight is pinned. Rook d1, of course, another pin introduced, but queen takes b4 check, and this position is just dynamically equal here. Rook takes e4, but again, this is all concrete stuff. These guys probably analyzed this stuff on computers beforehand, because everything is just like exact. Kramnik goes for knight bd2. Queen b4 would be a draw. E takes d5. Both kings are just teeter-tottering in the middle of the board, but white is just behind in development, and this is what black exploits here. But again, this is all like concrete stuff and exact. Black gets his piece, right? But it looks like it should just be a draw, at least by perpetual. Here, not Kramnik, but Shirov played king g4. and wind up losing after that. The correct move here, he has to play king g3. After king g4, knight d1 took place. Check. King d7, bishop b5, c6, bishop takes c6, king c7, and black's king is safe to d6 from all checks. Takes d1, queen takes d1 with check, and now you can see the major problem with the king being on that square. Bishop f3, now h5 check, king g3, that's where he should have been in the first place, but it's too late now to make up. Queen e6, g5, and then the king will not survive against these heavy pieces. Going back to position here, king g3, which is a slight nuance in the position. And it's very difficult, say after rook e4, king g3, and let's just make a random move. Queen b3, and then say queen f3. Black has to worry about this pawn promoting. So very, very sharp and difficult position, but king g4, just mailed it in for Kramnik. Excuse me, for Shirov. Okay, let's go to the next one. 2012. This is Caruana versus Kramnik, and same variation. Again, I still wonder why Kramnik switched, but maybe it's just a matter of taste. And there, he played bishop a6. Notice the other games he was playing this move, knight b6, and he opts for this line. Here, white has two main choices, b3 being one of them, and knight d2 being the other. g6, again, this is a major pillar in a white position. Black goes after it immediately. After all, with the queen here on e7, it blocks this bishop. So the bishop has to go somewhere. So either the queen has to move, or the fianchetto, the bishop. That makes sense, as sometimes black is pushed this pawn to b3, or white has pushed this pawn to b3, and black seeks to fight for the diagonal. Knight f3, and after this move, bishop g7, queen b4 is possible, and just going straight into an endgame. f6 forces black to liquidate this pawn, go into the endgame, and this is this leaves white with a slight pull here because of the pawn structure. This is kind of what white would like. I mean, it's not a big advantage, but you're in the ending. You have like pristine pawn structure, and you catch up in development. I mean, it's easy to place the pieces now, because before it was black that had usually have a nice leading development or something like that to compensate, but now he doesn't have any real leading development or anything like that. So it's just white just has a better pawn structure. You see, and then Caruana just starts attacking the position. c5. Now just to show you, if bishop takes a7, b4, and then white has to be careful, because now the bishop on a7 is in a trouble spot. So bishop takes a7 is no good there. Instead, Caruana plays c5. Okay, so he trades down a little bit, and now he plays bishop takes a7 because there's no way to trap the bishop. And here, white is just basically playing to either win or draw. It's almost impossible for white to lose here. Okay, black is down a pawn, and he can defend the position, but it's difficult. And this is the type of chess Caruana likes to play. So we see Caruana just putting, slight pressure. He's kind of doing Kramnik, playing Kramnik versus Self. This is like an oversight right here by Kramnik. He probably should have played King D7 here, but instead he does that, and this allows Bishop B6 check. Of course, the Rook is hanging, so if he captures this Bishop, then Rook takes. This forces him to go back here, and now Caruana trades some more pieces. And he's trading off because he wants to simplify the position. Okay? He has a better pawn structure, so he wants to simplify it. He has this 3-2 pawn majority on the king side, and he has this free outside passer here. So the simpler the position, the better for him. He just returns the bishop, plays e3. Again, you got to be careful, being greedy. Moves like that, knight takes h7. It doesn't look right, and it's, a lot of times it's not right. So now you have this attack here, and on this piece. Bishop e3. Not rushing. Threat here. King c8. Bishop drops back. h5. Knight f7. Again, just probing the black position. King c7. Again, just continuing, attacking the various weaknesses in the position and forcing black pieces to passive positions. b4, not only advancing the pawns, but blocking the action of this rook. King d7, rook d3. Again, notice the constant, pressure being put on the position. Now d5 is forced. King c2, knight f5. He's offering another trade. Bishop c3, provoking d4. King b3 attacking the rook. And knight g5. Notice the pin, so this can't be captured. So this is just a liability. King d6, f3, and this is just preparing to move knight e4. Making sure the knight is protected. Knight e4, and here Kramnik makes a blunder here, and the rook takes e3. It's all over because after d takes e3, then just bishop takes g7. So this is Kramnik's first loss that I have, in my database, in this variation. A good game by Caruana. This fits his style perfectly. Kramnik again, 2012 versus Sergei Karyakin. This is in Germany. Same variation. And he opts for knight b6 again. Remember before he had played this right away. Now he returned to this. Knight c3, and now he plays bishop a6. b3. And castle queen side. Rook e8. Notice the same themes with this build up against the pawn right here. f4. Just protecting the pawn. And we see f6. d6 is also played. f6. Castle's queen side. F takes. F takes. Queen takes. Queen takes. And rook takes. Bishop d3. White gives up the pawn, but he gets fully developed here. Rook hf1. d5. C takes d5. Bishop d3. Rook takes d3. Knight d5. Knight takes. C takes, and Karyakin gets his pawn back. And Rook HG8, and it's just too small amount of material. Good move by Kramnik here, giving up the exchange temporarily to exploit the skewer, and here the players agreed to a draw here. So we see in this opening what happened was basically Karyak had sacrificed the pawn for superior uh, activity in the position, and then at the right time, notice how White's position is fully developed, etc. Black is lagging in development, but what Kramnik did was um, get the pawn back at the right time, and was able to just easily and comfortably draw. Nakamura with the white pieces here, 2012. This is at the London Chess Classic, and we see another variation played. So instead of e5 here, right away in Queen e7, White waits and just plays Queen e2 and just protects the pawn. And the ideas are similar, but White is being a little more patient instead of allowing all that pressure to come, on this position by pushing, prematurely. Also prevents Bishop a6 here. So d6, g3, Bishop g2, castles, Rook e8, c4, Knight d7, and he plans on placing his bishop on f6. And this position really is pretty equal. White has not put enough pressure on the black position, but he sets up this kind of Marazzi bind type position, um, but he just does not get enough activity to really scare black. After c5, black is actually starting to play for an initiative here, and black actually, which is Kramnik of course, went on to defeat Nakamura. If you look up that game in the 2012 London Classic in this line. Alright, we're almost near the end. This is 2013 Vashil Lagrave with the white pieces. This is the Defeat World Cup. And here we see Kramnik, instead of playing Knight f6, he plays like this sideline right here, Bishop b4, check. And what this does is take away the most natural square from the knight. It's a little bit annoying. Of course, the knight like to be at c3 here, and he just takes that away. So he throws that in there, and then he plays Bishop c5. Now, where do we remember this from? This is from the beginning of the Kramnik days, right? To refresh your mind, where Kramnik was playing Bishop c5, right? Remember this, Queen f3, and of course there's different lines, but here you see c3. Okay, so Kramnik is trying to use some move order tricks here, and instead of playing Bishop c5 right away, he plays Bishop b5 check. He provokes the c3 advance and then comes back here to c5. However, here, instead of having his queen here, he still has a square for the knight. So Bishop e3. Okay. Again, Queen f6 is possible here, but Bishop b6, Bishop d3, Knight f6, castle, castles, and now Knight takes and b takes, and the Knight exchange is to free the pawns advance to e5, e5, Knight d5, and since the Knight has a happy home, there is nothing really, no bite behind the bark of e5. Bishop d2, d6, and again, When you have an advanced pawn like that, you have to be able to attack it and destroy it. Because statically it is considered an advantage. But again, if you can destroy it, then it's really nothing. It becomes a premature move. So c4 is played, knight e7. And note that since this bishop is here on b6, there will be no protecting this pawn with f4. Queen c2, knight g6. And of course, black would prefer white to capture and straighten out his pawns, have it look something like that after, of course, after this capture. Because if black captures, yes, he destroys the central pawns, but then he has the double C pawns, which again is a static weakness. If white can't exploit them, it's no big deal, but he's kind of keeping the tension in the position. So after queen c2, this is threatened, knight g6, and just putting that little added pressure here provokes white, Vachir Lagrave, Lagrave to take. So c takes d6, and again, black is just, to use the hip hop term, just chilling in this position. Rook a e1, knight e5. He goes after the bishop here. Rook e5, bishop e2, queen g6, queen d1, bishop h3. Again, notice how the black pieces end up in the same positions as if he had played bishop c5 early, that queen f6 bishop c5 variation in the Scotch. So now, this scenario, the only way to keep from losing the exchange is to play bishop f3, bishop f5 attacking the rook. Rook goes to h4. Then there's a problem here after bishop c2. Okay, because after queen e2, then this bishop d3 is losing the exchange here. Problem is this move is threatened, so there's no legitimate way to move the queen out the way without dropping this piece. So after queen takes c2, knight takes f3, Vachir Lagrave just resigns. So this line right here, nice nice little surprise weapon right here. Okay, against the Scotch. This is at the Olympiad in 2014. The black hat, it was Kramnik, of course, and Nadev, player named Nadev, who's rated 2484, strong player, and the white pieces. So here, Kramnik reverts back to this main line stuff, e5, and notice again, this position is going to be about activity from black versus the pawn structure from white. Notice how many pawn moves are on the board here, and only the queen is developed. And this is, it's always a price. If white wants to develop, then usually e5 will fall easier. So if white takes the time to protect e5, then he falls behind in development. So it's d6, queen f2. So now pieces are threatened. So then pieces have to move. Knight f6, again exploiting the pin. Knight b6 was possible. Bishop e2, again threatening the knight. He takes, castles, and knight e4 by Kramnik. Again, with this situation with the king in the middle and not being fully developed, grabbing a pawn after e takes f4 is kind of risky. We already got this fork threatened. Castles, for instance, bishop b2, queen d6. Let's say bishop e2 again, threatening here. Queen e7 and rook e1. Okay, and this is playable. It's a little risky. Actually at the rook e1, maybe knight e4. But I can just wanted to show you that. I can see why he didn't, want to grab that pawn up. Instead, he plays knight e4 with the clear goal in mind of just sticking that knight there, and f5. Knight c3, e takes f4, knight takes, f takes, queen takes, bishop g7, bishop a3, check, c5, just taking control of the center, rook a1, king f8, queen g4, bishop c8, rook takes, king takes, and this is helping black because black is up a pawn here. These exchanges. Good move by Kramnik. Queen g7. Bishop e6. Rook b8. Now in endgame, which is a bad endgame for black. Excuse me, bad endgame for white, being down material. Okay, now rook takes c6. Again, gotta be on your P's and Q's. Now we'll just lose to bishop b5. Well, it goes back. Rook b8. And there's no rush. These pawns are weak. Bishop takes a2. And he trades the a pawn for the g pawn gladly because now you have this guy running free and wild. a5, bishop e7, bishop b3, which paves the way for this pawn. Notice the coordination of the pieces, how the black bishop guards the a1 square, the white bishop guards a2, and there's really no stopping it. So at the rook f1, a4, Nadev gave the game up. Nepomniachtchi with the white pieces, and this is just a blitz game for 2014, but we see the appearance of this move again. And a little bit more aggressive play here from Nepomniachtchi, threatening knight takes e4, g7, bishop takes. And of course, here would be incorrect at the king f8 because now you have to do something about this guy. So for instance, knight f5, then the bishop can just drop back to b6, and you just lost a piece. So knight takes e3, d6, c4, trying to set up this Maratsi bind type position. And in these type of positions, usually you want to try to break here. You would like to break here too, but with the knight on c6, you really can't do it because the break here, you need to set up like a move like c6 and then d5. So black's best break is f5, even a6, b5. But again, weighing the different breaks in the position, f5 is the easiest one to get. So black gets to work on that, and this explains his next moves. Knight g7. Notice how knight here, bishop here, all support this advance. Knight c3, getting the king in the safety. And notice the grip that white is setting up on d5, so it's important to try to break this down. Bishop e2, f5, there it is. And notice there's no way white can successfully play the move e5, so pawn is just a sitting target. Knight takes. That weakens white's center a little bit. Now, this c pawn is still very strong in his grip on d5. Knight takes. Bishop takes. Castle. Queen d7. Bishop f3. King h8, just getting off of the light square diagonal. And we could say the game is just completely equal here. Okay, black just has to be careful of the white use of this outpost here. Of course, in the perfect world, black would love to get d5 and liberate, but it's very difficult with these pieces all trained on d5. But black's position is everybody's developed, all the pieces are free in the game, so there's really nothing he has to worry about. So rook e1, Nepomniachtchi. This attacks the bishop, because I don't want you to think that pawns are just being given up. If he gets greedy, then you have these type of scenarios. Now the bishop winds up out of play over here, and then black gets real active. Like say rook d1 attacking this pawn. And then you basically, just dropped a piece right there for some reason. Then you play a move like rook d8. So got to be careful with the pawn grabs. So Nepomniachtchi plays bishop d5, knight d3. Anyway, queen e3, b6, rook to f1, rook to e8, queen d4, knight b4, bishop d3, rook d1, bishop c2, rook f1, bishop d3, and they're just going back and forth. That game could end in the draw. Nepomniachtchi tries to push for more. Kramnik seems happy to accept the draw. But so now Nepomniachtchi provokes this move c6, and now the issue rests upon whether white can successfully, and that's one of the purposes of having the outpost, ladies and gentlemen, to kind of provoke the opponent into playing that move. And now you have to determine, say if you're white, whether you can put enough pressure on this pawn to win this pawn. And black, of course, wants to liberate himself by pushing that pawn. So he gets rid of one of the main defenders of d5, gets rid of the bishop. Kramnik goes back. So now you see the queen and rook attacking that. Rook e6 protected. Rook f6. And I'm just going to go a little faster here. I know it's been a long video. So we see this idea. White has finally gotten what he wants. Is this weakness right here. But is it enough? Right? Because black has defended it adequately. Now he pushes. That's what he wants. And now look what happens. And this is why I wanted to show you this game. So that weakness, right, is turned out into a strength for black. And Kramnik went on to win this game. Okay, that was a blitz game, but it was a good, instructive video on, on outposts. Okay, Nepomniachtchi, he played very well at the beginning. I mean, the position was objectively equal, and right here, I mean, he played very well. He had his goal to, taking over the square on d5, and then, Kramnik just defended. I mean, he got his isolated pawn. Nepomniachtchi got exactly what he wanted. Got the isolated pawn, but he couldn't do anything with it. And then next thing you know, Kramnik trades off some pieces, and he's racing up the board and wins the game. This is from 2015 FIDE World Cup. Iron Draken. Again, main line stuff. And just go back real quick. Notice again, the early queen e2. We saw this in the Nakamura game. Nakamura versus Kramnik. Instead of e5 right away. Just waiting. Queen e2. And the idea behind queen e6 here is just to get the bishop out. So a3 is played. Stop that. a5. Bishop f4. And all already is critical. And white has a simple idea here. He's just going to castle queenside. Right? The dangerous part is that you got this open B file here. But right now, bishop c f4 threatens this pawn. Do you give it up or not? Kramnik chose to ignore it. So bishop c5, castles, and castles took place here. Afterwards, Andreykin took this pawn. Bishop takes c7, rook e8, e5, knight g4, knight e4, and this bishop here is very annoying, keeps black from really exploiting anything over here on the b file. Now here, it just, after h3, knight takes, knight d6, and rook e7, and to me, white looks like he has a good advantage here. I mean, he's just he just has black tied up in knots in this position. I'm not really sure what he could do here, but he didn't play h3. And Draken, he played king b1, d5, e takes, queen takes, rook takes, and f3. Okay, and white is just better here, and actually white went on to win this game. And I think it has something to do with I'm gonna stop it right there. I think the critical move here was when Kramnik castled here and allowed this move, bishop takes c7, just going down the pawn. Better was knight g4, right? Trying to gain the initiative, threatening knight takes f2, bishop g3, then castle. Okay, this ties the bishop up, so he can't play that. h3 and then knight c5, f4, bishop a6, and then the game has like a more of a dynamic equality to it. Bishop takes, f takes, bishop c4, knight a4, bishop a7. Now queen d7, queen g6, and the game is it's sharp, but it's equal here instead of after these moves and just going down, just losing a bunch of, losing material, and these past pawns were a killer. He wind up, let's go through it real quick. Yeah, just 3-1. I mean, that's a wrap, even with the opposite color bishops. There's no way. I mean, even a great endgame player like Kramnik is not able to deal with this onslaught right here. No way that he can stop the threat. For instance, if king a6, right, he goes here to prevent this from happening. If king a6, then king b8, attacking the bishop. Okay, let me just save that real quick. So let me just show you. So if king a6, king b8, this guy has to move. Say he goes there. Now you queen. Right? This pawn is still protected by the bishop here, and then there's nothing to stop, the promotion. Okay, so that is why Kramnik resigned in that position. So this the version of the Scotch is pretty interesting. Again, holding back the e5 square, and black has to be careful here. But I think that of course in that position, just knight g4, and should be all right. Okay, these guys meant a lot. There's Niamniachi again, and I'm not even going to go through the whole game. So here, in this position, we see this continuation again, queen e2. This time, Kramnik plays bishop c5, castles, d5, and he just attacks the center immediately. He even takes on the inferior pawn structure in the endgame, with the compensation of the two bishops and some open lines. So we see Kramnik did a little homework against that line, and he just draws comfortably here, gets rid of the weaknesses, and that was it. Okay, so that, my friends, is the end of our um, look into the repertoire of Vladimir Kramnik against the Scotch. I know it was a long video, but that covered his whole career in this specific variation on the opening. So if you play e4 and if you play e5 with the black pieces in response to e4 and are looking for something to play against the Scotch, I think Vladimir Kramnik is a good role model. Is very solid, very strong player, and he plays two different lines. Or he played two different lines. One was this one that I just showed you right here with Bishop C5. He played this earlier in his career from 2001 to 2011, and he never lost in his line. So this is a good line for to play. Black stays very active, and then from 2011 to the present times, he had played this main line, knight to c6, and then also another line to consider is this little sideline variation of bishop b4 with the idea of c3, bishop c5 with analogous ideas that occur in this line right here. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed that video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.